Hey, how is everybody doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. And today we're doing another Q&A. Obviously, there isn't a lot of news going on right now, especially for Nintendo, but even kind of the larger video game industry, it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot going on right now. Everyone seems to be in stasis, and we're just waiting. What's Nintendo doing? What's Sony doing? What's Microsoft doing? What is E3 doing? We don't know a lot of these things. And so I still had the time and energy and interest in making a video. And I love to do, obviously, these long-form Q&As with you guys. I get great questions from you. So I decided to put the call out on Twitter, as I tend to do, for some questions for a Q&A. And really quickly, I got a bunch of responses. Tons of stuff about Metroid, which always happens, but even more than normal. Even in the first 30 minutes, it was more than half Metroid questions. So I decided to just kind of jump on this right away, and we're not doing as many as normal. We typically do 10 to 15 questions. We're doing 6 questions today. I got some really good ones, some Metroid, some not Metroid. And with that, let's just go ahead and jump into them. Of course, don't forget that if you want to be a part of these Q&As in the future and potentially be featured in a video with a shout out from me, then you should definitely follow me on Twitter, where I'm very active all day, every day, talking about gaming stuff, talking about life stuff. It's a ton of fun. So let's get into the first question, which comes from Emil at E4Emil on Twitter. And Emil asks me, is there any realistic expectation to ever get Metroid Prime Trilogy HD anytime soon? Say 2020? What about some early 19 rumors that said it is ready? So we're jumping right into Metroid. We're going into the Prime Trilogy, the HD remake, remaster, whatever is going to happen on the Nintendo Switch. It's been insane. You guys know, I've talked about it forever. Is there a realistic expectation that we might see it anytime soon? Honestly, I really do still feel that yes, there is a chance, probably even more than a good chance, that we are going to see this game on the Switch. Maybe even soon. Obviously, my answer is tricky here because, as many of you have probably heard me say before, I was expecting it for a long time. I really thought that we were going to be seeing it sometime soon, just like a lot of us. I thought we were going to see it, and it obviously never happened. And through that, I ended up saying, you know what? I'm sick of waiting for this thing. I'm sick of predicting this thing. I'm sick of getting excited for it, even though there's all these rumors saying that it's going to happen, and having it never show up. So I decided to just remove it from my radar. I haven't been counting on it. I haven't been predicting it. That being said, if I still look at the situation realistically, even though it probably seems crazy to still believe in it after all this time, I kind of do. I do still believe that it makes sense. We know Metroid Prime 4 is a game that they're making, and we know that the Prime Trilogy makes so much sense to bring over to the Switch in a variety of different ways. Even if they went the lazy route and they just brought the standard definition digital version over for $20, just like they did on the Wii U. I mean, bare minimum, you would think that they would do at least that. But then the question becomes, when would they do it? Would we see it in 2020 since we're still waiting for Prime 4? Does this become the good year to actually release the Prime Trilogy? And to that, I guess I say, I don't know. It's possible. I mean, I've been predicting some Metroid content in 2020, and I still believe we'll get some Metroid content. So yeah, in that respect, the Prime Trilogy makes sense. But since we don't quite yet know how far away Prime 4 is, I think it's pretty far away, one would think that maybe Nintendo's waiting to release it until it's closer to the release of Prime 4, which means 2020 might not make that much sense, you know? As far as the 2019 rumors, you mentioned the early 2019 rumors that said that it was ready. It was actually, if you think about it and go back, it was actually more late 2018 rumors than it was early 2019 rumors. Because there were conversations around that time leading into the 2018 Game Awards when we thought we were going to see Metroid Prime 4, that we might also see a Prime Trilogy. And there was a lot of behind-the-scenes chatter. Some of it was public, some of it was behind the scenes, and I was privy to all of it. That said, it was going to happen. I firmly believed we were going to see Prime 4 and or the Prime Trilogy at the Game Awards. And I thought Prime Trilogy was a lock to be coming to the Switch. And a lot of that came around the late 2018 time, and then, of course, the Game Awards came and went, and we didn't see it, and it was only the following month that they delayed Prime 4, which made us all realize, oh, well, if they were doing the Prime Trilogy, maybe the reason we haven't seen it was because Nintendo already knew they were going to delay Prime 4, and so they're also delaying the Prime Trilogy. It's a big, messy situation, and it's tough to just kind of parse through our feelings and put it all together, but at the end of the day, yeah, I still kind of do believe we're going to see the Prime Trilogy. Next question on Twitter comes from Brawls at Real Brawls, and they ask me, if E3 is canceled for this year, how would you feel about the majority of companies hosting digital events as an alternative, even if this means the end of E3 as we currently know it? So the E3 conundrum is very strange right now. We know that the viral situation that is affecting most of the world is also affecting a lot of public gatherings and concerts and conventions and stuff. And many conventions in the gaming space have been affected so far. And we know that E3 was doubling down on happening in June, but recently they've kind of walked that back, and suddenly they're making it sound like, yeah, they are considering canceling E3 specifically in 2020. And so to the question here, what about the majority of companies hosting digital events? Well, I would love to see that. Nintendo already has a digital event that they do for E3. Sony has started doing their own direct-like digital events throughout the year, so they could probably, with enough time, they could probably put something together and release that specifically for E3. I mean, Microsoft does do Inside Xbox, so yeah, maybe they could even do like an Inside Xbox thing or something similar. But I also just wonder if a lot of these companies might not go digital event so much as just release a ton of interviews and a ton of trailers out into the world. The problem with doing it that way, if they did it that way, is it would probably become overload. You know, E3 is already content overload as it is, and imagine every single company with all of their games just nonstop, everything is parsed out in individual videos that are, 2 to 5 minutes long a piece, as opposed to just one contained package. The contained package is the best way to get your immediate messaging out, and then you've already seen an hour of Microsoft talking about, 15 new games, but then you can go and find the interviews and the individual trailers afterwards that you want to, as opposed to only being able to go to Microsoft's page and seeing, oh my god, there's 40 new videos they all put up this morning. How do I figure out what's what? It's so much easier when it's all in one contained package presentation. Whether that's a live press conference or a direct, I mean, it doesn't really matter. The point is they all come together in one thing that you watch for a specific amount of time. And so to answer the question, I mean, I would like the idea, and I would think that some companies would try to do something like that and follow the direct model, but I don't know that they all would. And so it's really kind of tough to predict what would happen if E3 doesn't go down. We know that Gamescom has committed to still happening, and Nintendo, Microsoft have committed to go in there. I don't think Sony has, so maybe they all just say, screw it, let's just wait till Gamescom. That could happen. Who knows? Who knows? And you talk about if it's the end of E3 as we currently know it. I don't know that I'm yet ready to predict that it's the end of E3 as we know it, but I do think most likely it will be canceled this year. It's sad to say. It hurts me to think about, but it's honestly how I feel. It's probably not going to happen this year, you guys. Next question on Twitter comes from VG Mobster at VG Mobster. What is up, buddy? Thanks for asking a question, man. He asks me, will Metroid Prime 4 end up being the swan song title for the Nintendo Switch, or will more big first-party titles follow it? Love the Q&A videos. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. So will Metroid Prime 4 be the swan song title for the Switch? Meaning, will it be the last big hurrah for the Switch? Nintendo's last big game on the console? Really good question because of everything we know about Metroid Prime 4 and the weird state we find the Switch in, For me, if you've heard my opinions before, this won't surprise you, but I'll remind you kind of how I feel. I predict kind of two things that lead into this question. One, I think Metroid Prime 4 is quite a few years away. Two, I think the Switch only has probably a few more years of life in it. I know a lot of people are dedicated to this idea that Kimishima said a while ago about the Nintendo Switch lasting 10 years, and people like that idea, and they think that it makes sense. And I just don't believe that, you guys. I cannot see the Nintendo Switch lasting as Nintendo's main front-facing hardware for 10 years. No way will it be 2027 before we get a new Nintendo device. Think about that. That is crazy, especially when this year in 2020, we have a PlayStation 5 and an Xbox Series X coming. It's just not going to happen. And so I very much believe that in the next 2 to 3-ish years, maybe around 2022 or 23, we'll be moving on from the Switch. Nintendo will be releasing new next-generation hardware, something that on a power level can compete a little bit closer to what the PS5 and Series X will be doing. Knowing Nintendo, it's probably not going to be up to par with them, and that's okay. But will it be more in line with them? Probably. To the point that it can probably get a lot of the multi-platform games that will be releasing on those consoles. I think that will be Nintendo's plan. And since I also think that Metroid Prime 4 is likely around 2022, you can kind of line up those years, and to me, they very likely could be happening around the same time. Metroid Prime 4 releases, we move on from the Switch to next gen, around the same year or so. It's part of the reason why I've been predicting that Metroid Prime 4 might honestly be, if not a launch title for the next machine, very possibly a cross-gen title the same way Breath of the Wild was. In fact, I think that's maybe the most likely. And because of that, could that make it the swan song title for the Nintendo Switch, the way VG is saying? And yeah, I actually think, you know what? It's not a crazy thought. I think that it's possible. Do I think it's for sure going to be that way? No, I think that there is a good chance that by the time Prime 4 will be coming out, Nintendo might have a couple of other, fairly reasonably high-profile titles that they might releasing on the Switch as well. Not necessarily their next-gen machine, but the Switch. So maybe it's not, but is there a chance that it's the last big hurrah for the Nintendo Switch? Yeah, I do think so. Next question comes to us from Kevin Tendo at Nintendo Review on Twitter. And Kevin asks me, do you think Zelda Breath of the Wild will be released before Metroid Prime 4? Breath of the Wild 2, I should say. If so, what are your thoughts on that? Will the next Prime game be a game changer or more of a slight evolution of Metroid? Well, I was just recently talking about that on a video. As far as Breath of the Wild and Metroid Prime 4, I definitely think that Breath of the Wild 2 is coming sooner. We've actually seen that game. We haven't seen Metroid Prime 4. We didn't see the first iteration for the 2 years that existed. Now that it's been delayed and restarted with Retro Studios, we still haven't seen it. So we know that that game is way earlier in development than Breath of the Wild 2. Because we have to remember, Breath of the Wild 2, not only has it just been in development longer, we also know that conceptually it started as DLC plans for Breath of the Wild, that they realized, hey, we can just make a whole brand new sequel game out of this. Something worthy of a $60 sequel to the first Breath of the Wild. Which means they've just been working on that game with the same already existing engine and assets for far longer. There's no reason to think Metroid Prime 4, that was only restarted literally 1 year ago, is going to release before Breath of the Wild 2. I mean, I would like for it to happen. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a maniac. Of course I want it to happen. But yeah, Breath of the Wild 2 is obviously farther in development and is obviously going to release sooner. I mean, it's not even crazy to think that Breath of the Wild 2 could release this year. A lot of people think that's possible. I think we're looking at about 25% chance it releases this year, but most of me, 75% obviously, thinks that it's next year or later. So I'm not predicting it for this year, but I could see it happening as a shocker. I could see Nintendo surprising us and being like, hey, this game's almost done. We've been working on it for longer than you think. It's coming out in November 2020. Like, yeah, that could happen. Metroid Prime 4? No. As I was just saying in the last question, that game is a couple of years off. You then ask me my thoughts on if Prime 4 will be a game changer or a slight evolution of Metroid, and I more think that it's going to be a sizable evolution over the first 3 Prime games, but I do not think it's going to be a game changer. For reasons I've said before, I know a lot of people kind of want or expect Prime 4 to be a game changer, and I guess I get the inclination to think that way, but to me that doesn't make any sense. If this was a new standalone Metroid game, a Metroid 5, a Metroid spin-off game, just something we've never seen before, then it makes sense to maybe expect a huge game-changing shift in the Metroid formula. But this isn't that. This is a sequel to 3 other games that already have an established formula, an established engine, an established first-person perspective, and an established kind of pace to the gameplay. There's no reason to think that Nintendo is going to make a massive shift with the 4th game in this specific Metroid series. Are they going to change it and add new things and new mechanics and maybe slightly alter or evolve some of the formula? Yes, absolutely. Especially because it's been over 10 years and over a whole new generation later. Again, it's been a decade and we went through an entire Nintendo generation before we finally come back to Metroid and to Metroid Prime. And so there's nothing but reason to expect some changes, some alterations, some evolutions, stuff to be very excited about. But there's no way that they're going to completely shift and alter the formula to the point of making it third person or making it an RTS game, or giving RPG mechanics or machine guns. I mean, they're just not going to be that crazy with it. They can't. They just can't do it. So personally, I'm expecting an evolution. Next question comes from Eric McDermott at SOPWAA on Twitter. What is up, Eric? And he asks me, if you could have any game remade in any style, what would you choose? I'd do Chrono Trigger in either Octopath or Dragon Quest XI engines, or Donkey Kong Country Trilogy in the Returns engine. So those are really good suggestions. I'm obviously not an RPG guy, but I do like the idea of what you're talking about. And to be fair, I did love Octopath. I think Octopath is amazing. It's one of the few RPGs that I think is great. So I like that. I like your Donkey Kong idea as well. For me, this one is a fun question. I kind of like this. I thought about this for a bit, and I think that what I would like to see would be No More Heroes done in like a Bayonetta style, Bayonetta engine, something like that. Because No More Heroes, especially the first game, which very much is like an open world sandbox kind of game with quite a bit of linearity to it, to be fair, and not a whole lot to do in that open world because of the time that it came out. I would like to see a Travis Touchdown No More Heroes open world sandbox game. Again, set in Santa Destroy, which is the name of the city in No More Heroes, and it's a big sandbox. But if the quality of the engine and maybe some of the combat was a little more akin to the engine of Bayonetta, because in my opinion, as far as just third-person action combat, gaming, and controls, Bayonetta is unparalleled. Better than Devil May Cry. I'm telling you guys. Better than Astral Chain. I think it's better than those. Bayonetta is pitch perfect amazing. And the engine is so smooth, and if you picture that engine and that Travis Touchdown Beam Katana combat in the same quality and speed that you could do with Bayonetta, in a world that's also open world Santa Destroy, I think that would be incredible. I thought about going into some horror stuff and using maybe the Naughty Dog Last of Us engine for a Silent Hill and stuff, because I really want some sort of crossover there. I think that would just be incredible. Stuff like that. But I wanted to stick with something a little bit more fun, and to me, No More Heroes in the style of Bayonetta could be amazing. And the last question for today's Q&A comes to us from Sean Camus at Sean Camus. And Sean asks me, which big title is Nintendo going to launch to combat the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X? Very, very good question, and surprisingly tough to answer, because I think a lot of us would like to think that a title like Breath of the Wild 2 would be the perfect title to be a foil for the PlayStation 5 and the Series X launch this year. And I think that it would be. I think it would be great. And I think it's even slightly possible, as I said in an earlier question. But because Breath of the Wild 2 is a mystery, and because I and some other people think that we're probably not going to see that game this year, then it becomes tough to say, if Nintendo wants to even release a title to combat the release of the next-gen consoles, what would it be? To me, the reason that's tricky is, to me, there's only a few titles that could really get that job done, and it would be a new Zelda game, a new mainline Zelda game, not a weird, Hyrule Warriors spin-off-y kind of dumb thing or something, but I mean a main game, like a Breath of the Wild 2, or a main Mario game, like a Mario Odyssey, a Mario Odyssey 2, a Mario Galaxy 3, whatever the next big Mario game is. Those are kind of two of Nintendo's only games that could really make a splash and an impact or a dent in the release of those consoles and keep Nintendo and the Switch focused in the conversation throughout the launch of the next gen. Now, I will throw one amendment in here, and it's going to surprise you guys, but given the current state of things, only in the right here and now, the way things are currently, would I ever say that Metroid Prime 4 could also be that game. And the reason that's a unique thing to right now is because typically Metroid and even Metroid Prime isn't that big of a series. It doesn't sell the best. It reviews well. The fan base is very passionate. But typically, a new Metroid game couldn't combat new hardware from Sony and Microsoft. But Metroid Prime 4 is so anticipated, is going to be so good, and is shrouded in such mystery with such a crazy development cycle on a console that is also so crazy popular, that right here and now in 2020, if they were going to get Prime 4 out to combat these launches, I think it would make an impact. But again, we know Metroid Prime 4 isn't coming out this year. We can probably suspect Breath of the Wild 2 also won't come out this year. A new Mario game, technically still up in the air. Not impossible that Nintendo, whenever they finally decide to start giving us information about new games for 2020, it's entirely possible that a new Mario game is going to be launching this year. They could have something ready in the cooker way earlier than a Breath of the Wild 2 or a Metroid Prime 4, in my opinion. They could get a new Mario game out. Even if it's just Odyssey 2, which to me would be on the more disappointing side if it was Odyssey 2. I would still be excited and buy it, don't get me wrong, but it's not really what I want. But if they were going to make the next big Mario game on the scale of an Odyssey and a Breath of the Wild, listen to me, an Odyssey or a Galaxy or a Mario 64 equivalent or whatever, that could still maybe be a big surprise that Nintendo's going to give us this year. And if so, that game could launch the same week that one of these consoles is launching, and it's going to keep Nintendo and the Switch and Mario in the damned conversation when the next gen launches, which would be very, very exciting. Because beyond that, you guys, I don't even know what else could do it. I'm sorry, there is one more franchise, Mario Kart. If Mario Kart 9 was going to come out this year, that is another one. And I do also think Mario Kart 9 could be a surprise shocker to be a 2020 title. I don't know if I'm putting money on that one. I think actually a next Mario game might actually be more possible, surprisingly. But Mario Kart 9 could do it. I don't even think a Smash Brothers or a Pokemon would do it to the same degree, because those games kind of appeal to like a slightly different audience. Like, there are huge audiences, massive audiences, but they're weirdly so specific. But a Mario, a Zelda, and a Mario Kart also have huge audiences that, to me, are just a lot more broad, honestly. The Pokemon fan base is one of the biggest fan bases on the planet, but they are only the Pokemon fan base. Smash, kind of the same thing, only the Nintendo fan base. But even people who aren't big Nintendo fans, who might still have a Switch, are going to play a new main Mario game and a new main Zelda game and a new Mario Kart. I think those just, personally, I think they capture wider audiences while also having massive fan bases. And again, only now could I think Metroid Prime 4 could also potentially make a dent. But really, I'm putting most of my money on those titles. A new Mario or a new Mario Kart, with a slight asterisk of a possible Breath of the Wild 2 surprise. These are the only games that Nintendo could release this year that could combat these machines. And so that is it for today's Q&A. Thank you guys so much to everyone who asked a question. If I did not get to your question today, I am sorry. I cannot answer everyone's questions. They come at me very fast and furious. But thanks to everyone who did ask. Of course, reminder, if you want to be a part of these in the future, please follow me on Twitter. That is where you can be involved in all the conversations and stuff that I'm talking about all day, every day. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.